Hello, everybody. The webinar will begin very shortly. We'll just take a few moments while everybody joins the call. So, a good afternoon from London, but I think it's probably more likely to be good morning where most of you are joining us from today. And welcome to our webinar, which is all about looking at kind of opening the digital door to government. We've got some fantastic speakers with us here today. I'll be introducing them in a moment and getting into conversation. I'm Siobhan Bonita. I'm a former UK civil servant, and I'm really delighted to be chairing this webinar on behalf of Global Government Forum, which works with civil servants all around the world, and also with our knowledge partner today, which is Maximus. So before I do get into introducing our speakers, just a little bit about today's topic of that digital door to government. So digitisation of government is really intended to make it easier for the public, for our citizens, to access services online. But it also creates opportunities to build key partnerships, to review how government itself works, and to look at efficiencies in kind of how benefits, services, and information is delivered. So today we're going to be covering things like what's some good examples of good practice in digitising government services, how you build in kind of customer-focused design, how using the right technology, how to make sure that services are being digitised in the most efficient way. I think given that all our resources are really tight across the public sector, how to ensure that government digital services are responsive, flexible, and inclusive as well, so that all people can access those services. So as I say, we've got 4 great speakers with us here. I'm going to get into conversation with our speakers in a moment, but this is really your opportunity, our audience, to put your comments and questions to our speakers. So we want to make this more like a conversation and for it to be as interactive as possible with you, our audience. So somewhere on your device, whichever device you are using, you should be able to see a Q&A function, a button on your device. Please do use that Q&A button at any time from now on to send in your comments and your questions. Don't wait till the end, and we will come to your questions as we're going through the conversation. And as I say, we'll get through as many of those as we can before the end of today's webinar. So let me introduce our fantastic panel today. We've got Christine Bellamy, who is the Chief Executive Officer at the Government Digital Service here in the United Kingdom. And Chris is focused on helping the UK deliver world-class digital services that transform the way citizens interact with the government. And as the CEO, Chris is responsible for the strategic direction and the operational excellence of that government digital service. Prior to her current position, Chris was the director of gov.uk, and before joining the civil service, she held a number of roles leading digital transformation initiatives, including working at the BBC. Then we head over to Iceland, where we will hear from Vigdis Johannesdottir, who is Chief Marketing Officer for Digital Iceland, which sits in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs. And from there, Vigdis leads internal and external communication, branding, culture, education, and strategy. Vigdis has been with Digital Iceland since 2020 and has really been instrumental in growing its impact, with special focus on the change management needed for everything it does to succeed. She's got over 25 years of experience in communication, marketing and branding, and began her career in the media, which included Chief Operation Officer at one of Iceland's top advertising agencies. Then we head over to the United States, where we will hear from Jesse Polsilkin, who is the Acting Executive Director of the Technology Modernization Fund at the US General Services Administration, and is focused on implementing IT solutions across the government that improve agency processes and systems. Jessie has previously worked on the acquisitions team at 18F, improving the way that the government buys technology. And she's also worked in a variety of non-profits as an organiser and technologist, supporting colleagues to become stronger users of technology and improving online systems, including for social workers, lawyers, and food pantry managers. And then last but by no means least, we will hear from Raymond Holder, who is Vice President Digital Growth for Maximus. With a global perspective and a keen focus on growth and innovation, Ray has made significant contributions to clients spanning over 90 different countries and 4 continents by harnessing the power of technology to drive transformative change with organizations and to improve lives. And before joining Maximus, Ray served as principal for US federal healthcare at Amazon Web Services. And he also spent a decade in Europe collaborating with healthcare leaders and foreign nationals across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, and has been recognized for his significant impact on the healthcare sector for the work that he has done. So I'm sure you will agree, we have great speakers with us here today. As I said, we want this to be a conversation. We want to maximise the chance for you to talk to our speakers. So please do send in your comments and your questions as we go through. But I'm going to kick off this conversation now. And I've really got a kind of a general opening question, really. And I think, Chris, I'm going to put this to you first. I'm going to come to you first. So just from kind of where you are now and your experience in government, can you tell us a little bit about what your current priorities are and maybe give us some examples of what does good practice look like in digitalising government services? What's working well, but also maybe what are some of the challenges that you're facing?
Yeah, absolutely. And so wonderful to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's quite an interesting time in the UK. We've got a new government, which is a change after 14 years. We've got a sort of a new mandate to think about modern digital government and what it means next for citizens and for civil servants as well. And so there's a real momentum. There's a real sort of atmosphere of ambition in the air. So that with that comes great ideas. And we have a mandate, and the mandate's really important. If you don't have the buy-in from any organisation, it's very difficult to get things done. So it feels like a really positive environment for us to do our best work. And you find GDS and in sort of a pole position to help make that change going forward. So we've had 12 years of good service where we've managed to produce a good offer for citizens with particularly high trust. Fundamentally, that's around the sort of gov.uk proposition and its website, really leading on user-centric design, which we're really proud of. But this year and this time is all about transformation to truly proactive services for users, building on work that you'll hear from many on this call, using best practice from around the world, but fundamentally changing it from a passive experience to a much more sort of connected experience of government. And in practice, that means rolling out the One Login programme, which is a big enabler, which is in its 3rd year, which ties up all our services across government. So you're logging in once and you're getting access to all services. It starts to think about digitization through things like documents, etc., which has been done in other nations across the world. But fundamentally, we need to do that by wrestling with this question around trust, because our services are currently well trusted, and we need to make sure that we wrestle with that problem so we don't lose that trust as we move to sort of a more proactive experience. So the tech's there, this is possible, this is tech we can build, but it's all about doing the right thing for the user at the right time. That's where you find us. So we have a very full roadmap. You can expect the offer in the UK to really change for citizens, which is fantastic. We're thinking specifically around cohorts of users we can drive change with, and that's already proving to be great for experiences. But this next 2 years is a very full roadmap with a real proactive move to proactive service.
Oh, I'm going to carry on. I think, Chris, we've lost you on your camera, but I think a great way to, there you are. Thanks, Chris.
Final moment. It's like
Oh, I'm gonna continue anyway, Chris, but I'll kind of pick up on some of the things. It's really good to have that as kind of the first response to that question, because I think you've brought in the issue of trust being really important in terms of good practice, and you're building on gov.uk, which is a trusted service. People have given great positive feedback to that. And as you say, moving now to a more proactive kind of service delivery where you're trying to, it's kind of the tell us once, one login, all the services combined. So as a citizen, you go in once and you get access to all of those services, and those services themselves then should be more joined up and easier for the citizen to navigate. And then this sense, which maybe I think some of our other speakers might resonate with, this sense of meeting the user at the right time for them. So looking at kind of people's life stages as well. And on that note, Vigdis, because I've heard you talk about those kind of issues around life stages as well. I'm going to come to you. So what's happening in Iceland, and some of those things that Chris said, do they reflect good practice in Iceland as well in terms of delivering good digital services?
Definitely. And hi, everybody. Really, I love taking part in conversations like this and hearing from my peers globally. We seem to all be struggling with the same things. But yes, life events has been a focus for us. We're kind of shifting from talking tech towards life events and then explaining the technology through life events, because that's something the politicians and our end users are understand and relate to, going on, learning how to drive or whatever the life event is. There's all sorts of technical things and web services and things that need to happen to make those services digital. But that when you explain it in a more practical way, it seems to work better for both, political parties, politicians, and as well as agency leaders and the people we're working with. And the thing is that we kind of focus on, when you focus on life events, you have usually something that is you have to go to multiple agencies. It's not just one agency. So we've kind of created a small spear through all the silos. So we're getting agencies to work together, and which is I feel a huge accomplishment. When you start talking together, it seems that everybody has the same problem and everybody's fixing the same things. And I think that really is helpful, and it helps with building trust, which is extremely important towards government. We have a high level of trust, or usually depends on what day it is a little bit, what topic the government is handling at the moment. But in general, we have we have the trust towards the Icelandic government, and that is important to be able to move forward. We have an EID that over 95% of the working population is able to authenticate themselves online. So at the moment, authentication accessibility is a huge focus for us in terms of if you have some sort of handicap, or even it's short-term or long-term. And I guess our problem, or our what we are working with, is that it's down to individual level. We are only shy of 400,000 people. So it's I guess we could be looked at as a really nice test market for you big guys out there. But we are down to the individual level. So we are facing really, really complex things to solve, which we've solved more or less technically, but it's the change management, and it's the trust, and it's the independence of and all of these things that we need to work on. So as well as implementation. So we have core services that we have built, and a big focus for us now is implementation. We have 41 agencies that have willingly moved all their websites onto our government website. So they have are part of that community, over 20 on the way, and we are expecting municipalities starting to come around the new year, and then ministries as well. So it's been interesting.
Vigdis, thank you so much. I mean, bringing in other elements, I think building on what Chris said, but bringing in other elements. really interesting what you said there about technically, this is possible to do. And actually what you're saying is some of the challenges are around that change management. So breaking down some of those silos, getting people to work together, getting people to come and bring their services onto the platforms that you want them to use. And I think probably for the audience, that might be things that they definitely recognize where they are sitting, I think, because that comes up in a lot of the conversations that we have of digital transformation. And obviously you mentioned there, so 400,000 people. So as you say, relatively small compared to the United States. So I'm going to move over to the United States now. Jesse, I'll come to you in a moment in particular to hear specifically what's happening in the GSA. But Ray, you work with organizations across government in America, and you've obviously got experience of elsewhere. Are these issues that Vigdis and Chris are talking about, are they things you recognize? What would you say the public sector is doing well at, and where would you say some of the challenges are from them in moving their services online?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for having me. One of the key things that I think has really helped move the needle for U.S. agencies is, just a few years ago there was an executive order focusing on customer experience. And whereas before you had some specific agencies that were kind of leaning in and driving a focus on human-centered design and citizen experience, GSA, Jesse, where you work, that was one of them. The Department of Veterans Affairs was another one. There are some specific agencies that were leaning in and had been for really the last decade or so. The executive order that was addressed over 22 or 23 different high impact service providers. And that made everyone across the board look at, well, how are our services being consumed by the citizens and what are they struggling with? And how do we drive engagement and drive adoption and ease that interaction for our population. And so that's a trend that I think is a good one. It's going to continue. And it's gotten to the point that I think we were talking before we started, that the recognition of the importance of customer experience and cybersecurity is so common that those are threads that pull through every project and everything. And I'll tell you, a decade ago, it was not like that. So that's one thing that I see that's a trend that is definitely positive. On the challenges side, Vigdis, I have to tell you, there's a little bit of envy in my face when you said there's high trust in the government. One of the challenges that we're facing is, in the United States particularly, is kind of growing distrust with government services, and not just federal government, but also state and local. And so finding ways to reach people with the right information, combating misinformation and disinformation that may be distributed by people internally or externally. Those are challenges that we see. And then the last thing I'll share, and this is kind of a perennial thing, and I think it would not surprise me if 10 years from now we're still wrestling with this. It's the budget constraints, and legacy systems. So right now, across government agencies, the federal government, Gartner did a study and found that 80% of the IT budgets are spent maintaining legacy systems. And if you have 80% that's focused on those legacy systems, then only 20% do you have for innovation. And when you balance that with the risk of disruption, because there's always risk, it makes it really hard to get big things done if you've got systems that have been built over 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And so those are things that, again, on the positive side, the focus on customer experience and the kind of broad adoption and awareness of that. And then on the challenges side, it's kind of an eroding trust in government and this legacy, the burden of the legacy integration and modernization because of the size and budgets, it makes it really difficult.
Thanks, Ray. Yeah, fantastic. I think it's nice to hear you saying that the government's getting better at the kind of building in the customer and the design from the start of the policy process. But those big challenges around combating disinformation and growing trust, we'll come on to that in a moment, I think. And also, I will ask all of you after we heard from Jesse, I'm really interested in this. How do you do this when you've got limited resources? Because that's a question that public servants always ask us on our conversations. So we'll come back to those. Thanks, Ray. Jesse, over to you. Give us some of your thoughts from the GSA perspective of what's going well and what are your kind of priorities on digitalizing services?
Absolutely. So, Ray, you pulled some of the ones that are really important and I think about a lot. And for those who are less familiar, the Technology Modernization Fund is an investment fund operating. It's not quite a VC firm because we are inside government, but we are not Congress and able to invest in projects across the American federal government, specifically federal. And that allows us to see the challenge that Ray described exactly, and is one of the things we are looking for. If we invest in projects that ongoing still can only get operations and maintenance money, we are only continuing to replicate the same exact problems that exist. And so we are in a really cool position in order to help push agencies and Congress to think a little differently about how they are investing and spending their money. So it's not just, can we get more money, which is a significant challenge, but also how are you spending the dollars you have, and how can we help move you off of those legacy systems without just then creating the next legacy system that we'll need to move you off of in another couple of years. So I think similar to what others have said as well, we're really focused right now on understanding projects and finding projects that affect both mission delivery, that are actually impacting mission delivery and are not technology on their own. Sometimes that is the case. We invested in like a major network infrastructure project for the USDA, the Department of Agriculture in the United States, which means that we are investing essentially in broadband infrastructure across the entire country. That kind of stuff has to happen, but it's only as interesting as the service delivery if people are actually then getting better experiences, if workers in any given field office are actually able to do their jobs more effectively. They quite literally have enough bandwidth. And so I think, to me, that's where I just want us to stay really ruthlessly focused, is how can we make sure that technologists see the importance of mission delivery, and that folks on the mission delivery side, we spend a lot of time talking about, and as we did just before the session began, how do you make sure that those folks understand that technology is central to mission delivery at this point, and to building trust. It's not a TMF investment, but the IRS launched Direct File this year, which will be maybe shocking to those of you who are not in the US, but the ability to direct file your taxes with with the Internal Revenue Service, because they already have that information that you need, and that should be a no-brainer. And they were able to really get that done. But to me, that's an example of, you have low trust when you think, well, how can the agency that has my data not be able to use it? And so releasing these kinds of digital services, to me, is one of the ways in which we can really ensure that actually we can rebuild trust by showing that we know who people are through that kinds of information exchange.
Thanks, Jessie. So lots of, in terms of kind of good practice, I think a couple of things that you highlighted there: focus on mission delivery, so really be ruthless in that focus. But also, you alluded to, there needs to be good, I think, collaboration and understanding between policymakers, technologists, between different professions and different functions, and they're working together and understanding where they all fit in that overall picture. But again, I think highlighting some of the challenges. So my next question, and please do get your questions coming in, but my next question, I'm going to come back to you then on something I think you all touched on, is this: what advice would you give to people when they are operating on these legacy systems, but they're being told you need to modernize, you need to digitalize your services? How can they do that in the most kind of efficient way? Where should they even start? And how do they make the case for investment in kind of new technology and in modernizing the systems that currently exist? It's such a difficult, I think, picture, and complicated picture across the public sector. Vigdis, I'll come to you because you've done so much of this in ISON, but kind of what advice would you give to people in terms of how they do this digitalization, the transformation that they need to do, but in the most efficient way? Where do they start?
So we have an hour, or I need to address Jessie's mission delivery is really important, and we have a clear mission, as in we simplify people's lives. So for the Icelandic government in general, they were, unified in that they were going to move towards digital. It was going to be the number one way that the government is communicating with their citizens. So we have the mission, we have the mandate, and we have the funding. So we are the resource that agencies can go for. We also have other ways towards legacy systems. But I think that's something when you have the ability to be able to stretch a little bit, and in terms of the public, and again towards trust, finding something that's simple and people relate to, and find it a little bit fun and interesting, is also something, just to be able to show, taking the low-hanging fruits and be able to show what you are talking about when you talk about digital services. Because we all have different, there's a different picture that forms in everybody's head when we talk about digital services. So we went for example, parental leave, took something really complicated and made that completely digital from A to Z, where you can apply online and it goes directly digitally to your employer, to your spouse. You can, it calculates for you, and you have everything ready, and you can re-enter the application, and it talks to, through APIs, it talks to all sorts of things, things that used to be a lot of paperwork. So you're able to show the piles of paper. We have the digital driver's license, something that the plastic one is piling up at district commissioners' offices due to the fact that the young people that are getting their licenses, they don't even think about collecting it because they have it on their phone, and everything that's important in life is on your phone. So it's kind of just being able to show and tell, I guess, and focusing on the low hanging. And it took us a while. We have very capable agencies that have really strong IT infrastructure that are not, didn't work with us at the moment. We can feel the, what do you call that, oil tankers that are kind of turning your way, and you get a little bit nervous about, okay, how are we going to handle it when they say, okay, let's go for it. And we're at that stage at the moment, but we, go slowly and build trust and get people on board. You need to educate, and explain things, the show and tell, so you can imagine, so the agency leaders can kind of visualize their own agency and see, oh, perhaps we have some opportunities here, and not just throw it, okay, here's an idea, just throw it to the IT department. So it's a change management. But yeah, I could go on for a really long time.
Whole webinar just
but I think having it really simple and visual.
Yeah. Thanks, Vigdis. Chris, in the UK, is that similar to what Vigdis was saying? Is there kind of a prioritization of services that you want to digitalize? And do you agree with this? If you can show people how one service has been improved by digitalizing, then it helps with the business case to do the same in other areas.
Yeah, I think so. I think just building on that, just to answer that question directly, that is definitely the case. We have a sort of top 75 program which looks at the services that are used the most or are the most important at time of need. And there's been a big change program to ensure that they are absolutely first-class services for government, and there's been real traction with that approach. So I think that's absolutely a winner. It worries me, the word legacy and sort of tech, because it all is after you've put it in. And I think there's something around us thinking about our organisations, not just a policy organisation, but they are digital organisations. They're run fundamentally, these are, and I know we don't do everything through the technology, but that is the direction of travel, and a lot of it is moving in that direction. And if we had that step change, we would think about legacy in a different way. I mean, we've got colleagues on this call that have worked for some of the big digital organisations. They would talk about legacy a little bit differently. They would think that was part of their stack that they were constantly replenishing. And I think one thing we need to do in government is say there isn't an old and a new. There's always something that's old and new, and that would help us, I think, to think of, oh, if we just solve that, we'd be able to do this. I think there's a mind shift for government to make. I think in doing so, absolutely backing up the Iceland story, when leaders ask for funding, they should always be considering what they need to do with old tech that they think is not fit for purpose. And in doing that, they will probably lead with a story that is much more about the outcome for users or the outcome for savings for the state. The UK is quite good at rigorous business cases, and be really happy to talk to anyone about that. We have to really prove the benefits to why we invest in tech. I think that's a really good thing. It's a very robust system. And in doing that, it helps you to refine your problem. I think the second thing I'd say is if you can move to product and away from program, that's very helpful, because these programs are legacy programs, probably, that they start with an amount of money that runs for 3 or 4 years and then they end. And if you can think more of a mentality of this is the thing that always happens. The Gov.uk is a great example. It's classed as part of critical national infrastructure. So it's always got funding on the bottom line. Now, we could argue that it needs more funding or less funding, but you're not bidding for it every 3 years. Whereas quite a lot of the tech programs in government, so there's something structural about the way we think about tech in government. And I think for leaders who are deciding to do their next tour of duty as you stay in the US, we've got to lean into that this time. If we don't, we'll be doing some great incremental changes, but we will not be doing system reform. So change the terming around legacy, concentrate on some high delivery around prioritisation. But for anyone coming up through the leadership ranks in the next few years, we've got to crack the way we buy things and the way we fund things. And I don't think that's necessarily always the politician cycle of the 4 years. I think we need to be braver with this is a 10-year investment in data infrastructure. I think there's been so many bad examples of it going wrong. There is an open conversation now to be had about big enablers that will transform government. So I think they're the things that we should concentrate on now.
Thanks, Chris. Jessie, I'm going to come to you next, and then Ray, because you previously, in a previous role, you were involved in buying tech, weren't you, across? So does what Chris say, does that kind of ring true to you in terms of maybe how we get it wrong sometimes at the moment?
I'm actually, if it's okay, I'm going to go back to something else she said, which is, to me, I'm less concerned about buying. I mean, buying is a clear blocker and challenge in terms of buying specific products. But again, I think if and when I see agencies and was even in that position of trying to buy their way out of a problem, I think it gets to exactly what Christine is talking about, which I was at a meeting yesterday where a large agency said, well, we talked to this vendor and they promised that they could fix every single one of our problems. Now, it's a lovely product that they were looking to buy. The problem is not the product. The problem is that they were, in that case, I think, really outsourcing their mission, and the expectation that that delivery would happen. The service delivery was essentially then happening by that particular software product. That's not on one hand, technology needs to be the enabler here, and on the other, right, Chris, that doesn't do it. And I think that's where I've been so excited about the TMF in terms of trying a different model of funding. It does not replace what needs to happen in terms of the way that central funding happens for mission delivery and technical projects. But the idea that, in fact, you do need to commit a 3 to 5 year chunk of money, we can still hold people accountable, and we offer those funds upon certain delivery milestones. But saying we understand that to really shift what you're doing, you need to see a capital investment in a different way than, and outside of, also to disagree slightly, I think the top 5 services tend to get the support they need, right? A crisis, there's always going to be some sort of public crisis that gets those key services where they need to get. And I think where I've been interested in the TMF is, what do you do with the second order services, which in some ways fuel all of the distrust? You think, well, I can get my driver's license and that's fine. But I want to go, we're thinking a lot about the hurricanes right now and accessing FEMA services and other emergency services that are outside of that traditional boundary is where it gets really complicated. And
maybe we can come to Vigdis on that in a moment, because obviously Vigdis has had experience in Iceland of using their digital services very effectively, I think, in emergency situations. But I do want to come to Ray. Ray, we've got questions coming in, but just I want to give you an opportunity because
Sure.
you mentioned in particular this issue of kind of funding and budget constraints being a big challenge. So did you want to add anything to what the others have said on advice to people in terms of how do they do this in the most efficient way?
Sure. The one thing that I'll highlight that I wholeheartedly agree with is what we call making technology make a difference. It's those user journeys. It's life. We all have these touch points where when we need to rely on government services, and when we need it, if those services are simple, if they're seamless, if they're secure, then our trust in the government increases, and our chances of going back to those resources, going there, increases. And that's something we see across government. We're fortunate enough that I think we touch something like 15 million customer contacts a day. And so these are the kinds of trends that we see, that the simpler it is to access the services, the more seamless it is and integrated with the way that they expect things to work. And then built-in security on the back end. Those are things that are critical, and focusing on those particular experiences and making them less painful. Where I used to work, we call those kind of annoying things paper cuts. When you go to a site and it doesn't work the first time, you have to reload it, or it takes a lot of clicks or different journeys to find it out. We call those paper cuts because it's annoying, it hurts, and you're willing to push through it, but you don't like it.
Yeah.
And if you focus on those areas that have the most impact, that impact is what's going to drive approval of the budget. That's what's going to help. It's going to help the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, come to the table and say, "Hey, we're going to find a way to make this secure in the construct to get things done the way that you want to get done." And then the last thing I'll share is where we see agencies kind of leaning in on investment is on these platforms and infrastructure that can help speed the process of releasing more features, measuring things, testing things, because that's where if we get to what Christine was talking about, kind of continuous innovation and continuous improvement, it's those platforms that enable you to do that. And so again, it's about making the technology make a difference, making sure it's all simple, seamless, and secure.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. And I think one thing you've all kind of touched on this is if you can demonstrate the benefits of a service, that helps you build trust with your citizens, because the best way of doing that is they see that things are getting easier for them. And this is related to Clarence's point. So Clarence Abrams has asked a point about data protection. I think the other area where you need to build trust is making sure people think their data is secure as we do everything digitally. And Clarence has asked, I think there should be a strong disclaimer regarding the protection and safeguarding of citizen data. As we know, data is not 100% protected, but let the citizens know that we've implemented all the safeguards to protect and secure their data. Also, a firm sanction policy should be in place, should be established for mismanaging and using the data. So this question around, to what extent can we reassure citizens that their data is secure? And I guess in a world of new technologies which have positives, are we also vulnerable as we put more and more online that our citizens' data is becoming more vulnerable to kind of attacks and cyber attacks? So how big a reassurance can we give people? Jessie, I'll come to you first on this one.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is in some ways the central question, which is how do you secure things enough that it is really protected, and not so much that it actually makes it impossible to access. And that for us, I think, is where in the US, because we don't have the same kind of trust in government, and there's not the same kind of centralized identity platforms in the same way, we're in a really different position. So the TMF has invested in the Veterans Health Administration and the VA, which serves, I think there are 10 million veterans that get services from the VA on a regular basis that are getting health services. And how do you ensure that you are not allowing just anyone to walk in and and get that, like, because a lot of that is frankly in-person interactions. How do you make people feel trusted and known by their healthcare provider, while also having the level of rigid protection in those interactions to make sure that no one is getting to information that they should not. And that has been a very, frankly, interesting design challenge, because we don't have because of some of the mistrust and because of some of the centralized issues. And that's where the VA team has really had to center the experience in that case of veterans. They have had to do continuous research with the veterans that they're working with in a lot of different sets of interactions, right? It's not just have a data security policy and call it a day, but that data security policy means something really different to a disabled veteran in a rural part of this country who has already had to travel an hour and a half to get to a healthcare clinic, and being told, well, you didn't give me the right security answer at that moment, means that they don't come back for healthcare, right? Or they're not getting actually like life-saving services that they might need. And so that is where I think centering the experience of both the veteran and the healthcare worker in that case, because the healthcare workers also don't want to spend their time validating and verifying information about patients when they could be providing services. So to invoke both Ray and our federal CIO, Claire Martorana, right? These simple, seamless, and secure actually all have to go together. And to me, that's where we're centering the users of both public and government workforce to make sure we're meeting their needs. It has been so important for our success.
Thanks, Jessie. Ray, so same question to you. Your thoughts on this kind of, to what extent can the public be reassured that their data is secure?
Yeah, there are a couple of factors related to that. I think one subset of our clients, like Department of Energy, for example, and the Department of Defense, they talk a lot about resilience and organizational resilience and being able to provide services. And I tend to talk more about resilience than just security, because I've found that availability is as important in engendering trust as anything else. If you go to access a service and it's not available, that, because of some other event, that ends up eroding user trust. That ends up limiting people's access to services, and they're less likely to use it. Particularly on the data side, Jessie, when you mentioned Veterans Affairs, they absolutely are looking. I mean, they've been looking at mapping the user journey and that cohort of people that are active duty service members, where they do have at the Department of Defense an individual identity that can be tracked, and they've kind of voluntarily, by signing up for service, said, hey, you can know everything and anything about me, including telling me where I can go or can't go, to becoming private citizens and having their beneficiaries and their families at VA. There's an area where there's that journey where there really is an opportunity to harvest and use some of that existing information that they voluntarily shared to their benefit. And what they're challenging now, it's interesting. We had a recent conversation with the chief data officer at VA, and she said one of the challenges she has is actually getting people, making people aware that services are available. And capturing their information, because not everyone is using digital services. Not everyone has an email address. Not everyone, if you're a veteran that retired 30 years ago, you might not even be aware that now you're eligible for certain benefits unless you get something in the mail, or your sibling or your daughter or your spouse gets something in the mail. So there are multiple challenges. But again, I tend to talk about resilience overall, and privacy and security is an important part of that. But that's the trend that I see across government agencies.
Thanks, Ray. Vigdis, similarly, a question to you on kind of security and trust. So you mentioned in the first question I put to you that you have high levels of people engaging in the services, and that they can be authenticated online, so they're not worried about being identified online. So they obviously are fairly confident that their data is being kept secure by the government. Do you think you've managed to achieve that?
Yeah, I would say so, even though we have the same legacy system problems, and that's kind of our focus with Digitalized, and we're kind of taking care of the front end and the authentication, giving the agencies more space to focus on securing the back end. For me, it would be what seems to be working fairly well is being really transparent with the data, so that you have accessibility to your data, and that's even helped us in cleaning up the data, because if there's anything that needs to be corrected. And then it's about teaching how it works. How does it happen? If you can access my data, can I see your data? Can anybody see my data? Just teaching people how this works. And then testing. We have a different concept. In user testing, we have a concept called Defend Iceland, which is fairly new, but we have hackers that are testing our products. So we are then, show and tell, explaining and fixing things. So, and I think that's really important, but with the transparency part, that you feel that you have a say in what's happening. They opened up the medical filing system here in Iceland. And it took a while, because I guess the doctors, old school doctors, kind of tended to write some things on the sideline of the paper that, oh, here comes the crazy lady who drinks too much. So they kind of didn't want to open up and show their dirty laundry. But getting agencies to be able to, trust their user as well, and just opening up the data and having this discussion, because when it all comes down to it, who owns the data?
Yeah. And just to the audience, any questions you've got about anything, doesn't have to be any questions I'm asking, but any questions you've got about digitalizing services, please do send them in. But Chris, I'm going to come to you. I'm going to put this question about data slightly differently for you, security of data. So I think there's the issue that Clarence maybe asked around, how do you reassure citizens that governments are keeping their data and only using it for things that they want them to use it? But also, can we reassure, as we move more and more of our services kind of online, can we reassure the public that that data can't be accessed by other people? That as Vig just said, you're trying to stop people hacking into the systems, but in reality, we can't prevent that 100%, can we?
No, I think it's a fair point, and we've all gone through the sort of CrowdStrike problems in the last few weeks, so we get this, don't we? I think generally civil servants, people who work in government, want to provide services that really work. So, and our users really want us to do this. Really, they think we've owned their data anyway and that we're using it. So the key is do it if you can do it well, or don't do it at all, would be my sort of mantra. If you do it, then there's massive benefits for government, and there's massive benefits for the user. I think there is an understanding, being honest, that sometimes things go wrong by users. That it sometimes happens with their bank, it happens with Amazon, it happens with, and you could say, well, that's different because you're the state, it can't happen. But there is an understanding that things go wrong, and we're mitigating to the nth degree to make sure that doesn't happen. And in doing so, to the point beautifully made by Ray, we are fundamentally providing services that aren't necessarily available at point of need and don't build trust. So if you turn that on its head and say, maybe once every 5 years there may be a problem, is that worse than all the problems you're causing every day? So I think we can be quite transparent with our users, and I think we are. I think it's a really good point made. But we're almost over-indexing for a day that might happen. And actually, it might happen, and then it'd be about how we mitigated it happen. What would be the worst event if it did? What really happens if someone finds out your name and address? What do people then go on to do? And that we could do some real scenario disaster planning around that.
Yeah.
And in doing so, may realise that actually chances of that happening outweigh the fact of not doing anything is worse.
Right.
And then we've got this sort of stubborn 20%, and I say stubborn, it's not the wrong, it's an awful word, but it's sort of there will always be a 20% of users that fundamentally don't use digital systems. It's 20% in the UK. We might move that 20% by a couple of points, but I think it's better to say it's going to be 20%. And actually, the way the young people are coming through, it's not going to go down. You think it'd go down, but actually, if anything, they don't use websites, and it might go up. And so if you know that, for me, there's this optimization about making that point of need really good for people who do want a face-to-face contact. But actually, if you don't do digital really well, that 20% grows. So it's not choosing not to do, digital inclusion should be about really making this 20% amazing. But what we're doing in effect is we're bringing all the water level down.
Right.
Seems a bit crazy. So I think the key points there are, we should absolutely, I think in 5 years' time, we look back and we haven't thought about someone being able to know that the state knows who you are and therefore you can get to services quickly. I think we'll say, why didn't we do that? That was a bit crazy.
Right.
I think the benefits of government are enormous, but I think it's coming and we're just putting it off. So for the bigger countries, I mean, Iceland shows you that the benefits you get if you do it. We're just putting off the inevitable.
Right.
So we might be better getting on with it and then
Right.
taking the risk if it happens.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're kind of veering into almost digital ID territory, but that would be a whole nother webinar. So I don't want to.
Opt-in, yeah, and it's
Yeah.
all about opt-in. That's why I talk about that 20%. That 20% might grow, right? But it's for us in the UK, it's opt-in, right? We're not going to mandating this.
Yeah.
It's an opt-in service.
Oh, I think somebody's trying to hack into Chris as we're doing this webinar. There we go.
I think people would opt in if the service was better. They'd opt in if the service was better.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
I
do want
to.
Ray, come in.
One comment. I want to say that it's hard not to be cynical about it because I truly believe that a lot of this kind of security and privacy as leaders, it's on us. Because if you look at Facebook, the rise of Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, if it's taught us anything, is that people will give up and share all kinds of private information if it drives engagement, if it gives them pleasure, and if it's easy. And so really you've got to figure out how to make it easy to use the services with the security built in, right? And having some secure by design and some technology things. And that's the only way that I see that we can do it, because I think if we depend on all of us, as individuals to make those highly, the most intelligent, safest decisions with our data, it's going to be hard.
Yeah. And Hoshang has made a comment saying most people are not inclined to read long documented disclaimer statements. So basically read the small print. So I think his point is it would be, the more transparent you can make it, the better, and that will boost trust as well. And Hoshang's got some more comments coming in there as well. I do want to pick up, so there's two issues I want to come back to. One on inclusion. So we've come to the issue of inclusion there. And I just want to ask, because this does come up. So I know there are some people, Chris, you mentioned maybe younger people not wanting to use websites, for example, because that's not the way they do things. But we also have people with accessibility issues. So some people with disabilities, we've got elderly who maybe are struggling as we move services online because it's just not easy for them to use those services. So to what extent do we have to bear in mind the risk that we are creating, even as we create great services online, we might be creating a new group of digitally excluded people, and how big a risk is that, Chris? I'm going to come back to you on that one first.
Yeah, I think it's interesting being a CEO of Government Digital Services. One of our major work streams is not about digital services. And absolutely, we talk about the One Login program. At the minute, we've absolutely over-indexed on that is you could do that face-to-face if you want to.
Yeah.
And there's more of that to come. And every single piece of work, we think about the excluded group. And yeah, that could be young that just actually, it's not just that they don't want to, there's just groups at every level, whether that's through disability, through lots of reasons, through digital exclusion in their life, and it's growing. So in all of our plans going forward as digital leaders, we need to think about the options that aren't digital. And as a products native person, that's all right, because we should be thinking of the end-to-end journey of where can people get what they need from the state. I mean, so for me, the headline is, in the last year, we've started talking about non-digital services more than ever. So our plans have just fundamentally changed. So in every single plan we've got, there is a work stream which is about the non-digital experience. And I think the more the way we do that, we'll just build better services for everybody, actually, if we take that approach.
Thanks, Chris. Jessie, you're nodding. Do you agree with a lot of that?
Yeah, and I think that, right, it's exactly about building a strong service much more than sort of focusing on the digital piece. One of our investments, they took the first thing that they did was take an 8-page form and make it 2 pages, right? Had they just simply digitized an 8-page form, we still would have had the same accessibility problems, or maybe magnified, because someone would then be right. You need someone to read and be willing to suffer through 8 pages that ultimately weren't necessary. And so I think, to me, it becomes a much different conversation when you've already simplified the process itself to say, great, and what's digitized? Where is the service entirely moved online, and where is it just significantly easier and more cost effective in that particular project? And they saved tons of money on trucking, because the volume that they were working on meant that they were trucking millions of pages across the United States, which is also not efficient or effective, and no one's particularly interested in. And that, to me, was also we need it. If you have a 2-page form, you can also use larger font. If you have a 2-page form, it's much easier to translate to multiple languages, right? All of the other kinds of pieces of accessibility shift when you improve the service itself. And stay focused on, in that case, what needed to happen, and then what data needed to get transferred, in that case, from one agency, in that case, to the State Department. Much easier to do when there's also less data moving around to build an API, rather than thinking about how do we set data security on this huge volume of personal information about someone.
Yeah, I think one of the mantras is never digitalize a bad process, isn't it? So always take the opportunity to fundamentally rethink the process. Vigdis and Ray, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, because we've got lots of questions coming in. So this one, just quickly back to trust, on one that Cornell has said, and I think this comes back to honesty. So Cornell has said, how do you users when companies are hiding breaches from people until personal damages are occurring, such as pharmacy service providers? So I think it's when there's been examples in the private sector of breaches not being dealt with in a transparent way, does that have a knock-on effect then to trust of government data? Ray, I'll come to you on that one.
Sure, it absolutely does. And this is one where, I had some experience with this front and center when one of our clients, we did an assessment for one of our clients and found a vulnerability. This is years ago, found a vulnerability, and there was protected health information that might have been leaked. And one of the things that was helpful in that instance in rebuilding trust was that there were specific laws passed and policy that said that if you identify that someone's protected health information might have been leaked, well, then you've got a clock that starts ticking, and within 10 days, you have to notify them that it was leaked or potentially accessed, and you have to, follow up with that within 20 days with a letter and so forth. And that actually ended up being a driver to make us think, what if we were one of these people? What if I was, in this instance, it was people who were active duty service members and their legacy information that may have been accessed. What if I'm the widow or the widower of one of those service members and I get contacted? What are the things that I'd want to hear? I want to know what it was, what happened. I want to know how I could get help. I want to know. And that really recalibrated the focus of the team, because we had some and I'll take the blame for it. We had some intense conversations with some of our counterparts that were focused on some of the technical items and some of the parts, the individual parts of the policy. Hey, the letter's got to be 1 page or less. It's got to be 12-point font. It's got to be a 1-page margin. And I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? Really? I mean, this is someone whose spouse has passed away, whose data may have been accessed. What are we going to say to her? And I found that the organizations that focus on that perspective, those are the ones that are able to engender more trust. And those are the ones that, because we're all going to make mistakes, and as we're iterating on products or services or however we do this, even with service design. And I found that the agencies that do that well and have more leeway are the ones that are really focusing on, okay, what is the person actually going through, and what does it look like from their eyes?
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Vigdis, same question to you.
I'm still focusing on the transparency, but we managed somehow, I guess because digitalizing was kind of a new identity, you managed to be not private and not government either. So we kind of this in-between space that people seem to trust, because we were simplifying people's lives. We were focusing on our mission. yeah, being able to be transparent on what we were doing and discussing it and saying out loud if something was not working really builds trust. And I'm not talking about it's something terrible, but there has been a lot of data breaches, of course, in Iceland and Icelandic companies. And we had a large summit last year, and we publicly announced that we were preparing for data breaches. So people were kind of expecting that there would be, hacker attacks during the summit, and we were able to then be more ready. So I guess preparations for it and having the discussion, I guess, not treating our civil, not treating people as they, have nothing to do with it.
Yeah. We've got a question coming in I'm going to put to all of you on digital capabilities, because I really want to talk about skills and capabilities that are needed. But Vigdis, very quickly, we did mention, and Jesse was talking about kind of digital and emergency response. So I just very quickly, could you just give us a sense of, you had the volcanic eruption in Iceland, and I've heard you talk previously about how helpful it was to have built a kind of digital platform that you could then use to help some of the people impacted by that.
Yeah, and I guess very quickly, again, I could talk all day about it, but again, it came down to the core services that we built, the front end, and we were able to pull all the strings together, because there are many agencies that need to come together, and information that needs to be correct and to get, when they get out there. And when people are in trauma or something is happening, you kind of need to spoon feed the information. So if we could stop the politicians going on the air and saying, yeah, we solved this problem and we're going to fix this, but we still need time to make it happen. We kind of went through that, but due to the fact that we had already pre-built all sorts of things, we were able to build the website, build applications, and even go through a version where people were able to sell their houses to the government. So they kind of just online through the phone. So yeah, I think that would be a great example of being ready, as ready as possible, but never misjudge the use of a crisis. And if there's not a crisis, create one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Not too many. We've had enough crises.
No, it doesn't have to be life-threatening, but it needs to be something that
urgent. Yes,
yeah.
there was certainly a lot of digital progress made during COVID, for example. There was a lot of kind of good progress done during COVID. So Amadou Barrow has said, and I'm going to put this question to all of you, what are some of the core capabilities, digital capabilities, that you have personally recognized in your workplaces as important for managers involved in implementing digital transformation strategies? So essentially, what skills do people need to be able to implement digital transformation across the public sector where they are working? Ray, I will come to you first, because maybe this is where you help people sometimes when you go in and work with organizations.
Sure, and I'll talk about it kind of from two different angles, because I think the two are critically important. So one of them I touched on earlier, and that was kind of building the foundation and the infrastructure that allows you to iterate quickly and securely, and to develop. So continuous integration, continuous development, continuous deployment, those kinds of platforms, building that capability is critically important, because if you're going to securely develop things and deploy them quickly and get features out to users and people that need them, you've got to have that infrastructure to do that quickly, and you've got to have observability and scalable infrastructure, all those things that as technologists we get excited about, and matter only to the degree that they deliver features faster and better to people, right? So that's kind of the back end. I see a lot of activity across agencies getting that right, because they may have legacy development processes. And then the area where, again, there's some agencies that have leaned into it and others that haven't yet, and we're kind of introducing them to that, is on the service design and the design thinking aspect of it. Do you really know who your key stakeholders are, and have you mapped their journey? Do you have a service blueprint that aligns what these people need with where they are and the services you can deliver. And then do you have those things that you can inspect after you deploy those products? Do you have a mechanism to measure that and to come back and to see, do we need to make adjustments to these things? That kind of journey and that kind of building that kind of resilient process are things that we see are really working. The last thing I'll say is one area where we mention things to clients that maybe they haven't thought about it before, and I know GSA has been all over this for years, actually, is looking at the maturity model. Or do you have a customer experience maturity model? We found where I used to work at a cloud infrastructure company, that if you can show people kind of where they are on their modernization journey and what you've learned from other people that you work with and other groups that you worked with, that the common challenges and where they can go, that allows them to see where they are and then set some bold agendas and some bold goals about what they're going to do in their organization. And you see some of that bold stuff happening at Food and Drug Administration and other agencies where they say, hey, listen, this is where we want to go and this is where we are right now. Those are the kinds of things that really, really drive change.
So ability to benchmark themselves maybe against some others, really helpful. Yeah. Jessie, so Ray mentioned the GSA there. Does a lot of that ring true to you as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there is, in terms of benchmarking in particular, my first answer when I saw the question came from another panel I was on yesterday, which is around candor. Being able to say that the agency that I was with yesterday, one of the reasons we invested in them is that they had done surveys that showed that only 10% of their staff felt like they could do their jobs effectively. That's pretty staggering, but a willingness to find that out, look at it, and then say, great, what do we need to do to fix that? And really take ownership to make that better. It's a really different story than if you say, well, we know people don't love the technology, but that's just what we got, right? There's sort of how are we approaching it? And there is something about, it is not actually a digital skill at all, but candor that was really necessary, and a willingness to meet people where they were that has made for that agency them quite successful. Ultimately, they hired some great product managers, they got some good developers in. Like, sure, that in some ways is a lot easier because those folks, you can have a digital development team do their job quite well when the policy staff and senior leadership understands the severity of the problem at hand. And to me, that's actually the skill that I feel a lot more strongly about than whether someone has a particular accessibility certification or certain kinds of design thinking skills. Like, those are great. You should get those. And, no amount of design thinking training is going to get you out of a hole if everyone around you would like to not admit the problem at hand.
100%.
Thanks, Jessie. Yeah. And you're all nodding there. So Vigdis, I'm going to come to you because it sounds like what Jessie is talking about. You said right at the beginning that a lot of this is more a change management issue than it is a technology issue. So if you are a manager and you're looking for help in terms of what capabilities do your team need, do you agree with what Jessie's saying there, that a starting point is actually being honest about where you currently are?
Oh, definitely. And that I truly believe that's how you build trust as well. And listening to, being user-centric, listening to the user and admitting that there is a problem. But we're not brought up that way. It's not the way that the government works. We're supposed to kind of pretend everything is okay. And I don't think it's healthy. And I think the younger generations are teaching us that we need to be open about all sorts of things, and that includes what's the problem, with our backend systems and with that we need to focus on. Just with the conversations that we have, for example, with disabled, and we've solved all sorts of things, but we've done that through proxy. And then they say, well, we don't want to do it through proxy. And our answer is no. But then we have to lower security and you have to be able to have the honest conversation without arguing, and show the willingness that you are actually listening and trying to improve.
Thanks. Chris, this will probably be the last comment then. So I'm coming to you. So it sounds like in relation to this question around what capabilities are needing, your fellow speakers are saying it's all about honesty, transparency, listening to your customers, but listening as well to where you all in your teams think you are. Would you like to add to that?
What a brilliant list. You've taken all my words. I'll just build on two things because I think everything's true. It's a broad church, isn't it? We need lots of skills. And then there's bringing all these skills together that aren't naturally bedfellows in a way that goes on to make great things. And in that is a sort of purpose. It's about purpose, that you've really got to want to do it. You could work somewhere else and earn a lot more money. You've chosen to work here. The common connecting tissue is purpose. And then I think I'd just add to it, it's about, there has to be a point where this you do scaled delivery, and we need to just make sure we're not leaving our best ideas in not physical drawers, but they don't get to scale out. I mean, if they're not going to scale, drop them quickly, because and that's cool, because there's so many ideas that just don't make it, and or we think they have and we're still doing them 2 years later. So yeah, purpose and driving scaled outcomes, I think they're the two things you're looking for in folk.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you to all of you. And Ray, I think you've just shared a book title with everybody so that they can pick that up afterwards. So thanks.
Sure, absolutely. I did not write the book, do not officially endorse the book, but it's probably 15 years old, and it's great about candid conversation. Let's be real about what we're going to talk about, or let's not do it, right?
Fantastic. Well, what a place to end. I love it when we have these conversations. The title's all about digital, but we always end up talking about things like purpose and people, because it ultimately is all about people. Thank you so much to all of you. I really enjoyed that conversation, and the time flew past. Thanks to our great speakers, to Ray, to Vigdis, to Chris, and to Jessie. Just to say, this is a kind of series of webinars ahead of an event we will be doing in Washington next spring. So please do keep an eye out for that, everybody in the audience, and we will keep you informed of the dates for that and how you register as well on that. We will be sending around a link to this conversation, to the video here. So if you weren't able to watch all of it, or you know there are colleagues who couldn't join live but would like to watch it on catch up, they will be able to do that. And we will also be sending out an article with the key points that were raised today. That will come around in a few weeks' time. Thanks to Maximus for being our great knowledge partner here today. And just a final thing to the audience, we'll probably send you a very short questionnaire. It might even be in your inbox already. If you wouldn't mind taking a couple of minutes just to fill that in for us, it means we can keep giving you the webinars on topics that are of most use and interest to you. So I'd be hugely grateful if you could do that. But from me in a now sunny London, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Good morning and the rest of the day, wherever you are. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye.